first thing we need to understand about English sentences is what a verb is and what a verb isn't. That is, we have to be able to identify the verb in the sentence, otherwise we can't really talk about anything else that's going on in the sentence. So if I were to present you with a sentence like this, thinking about the contested election, Sandor felt a sense of growing dread. And if I were to ask you to identify what the verb or verbs are here, I can almost guarantee, if I were to ask a group of people what they think the verbs are, that some people would identify that, some people would identify that, growing, some people would look at contested, say that sounds like a verb, somebody would say felt, some people might say sense, I sense a problem, that sounds like a verb. Okay, now, one of the reasons, because there's a lot of errors here if people did identify those things as verbs. In fact, I'll give it away right now. There's only one verb here, and it is felt. Felt is a verb, and nothing else in this sentence is a verb. Now, one cause for confusion is, I think that the most common definition people have of verb is that it's an action word. And people would look at, say, contested and say, well, there's a lot of action there. Contested, I can see that there's some action there. Feeling, felt, well, that's some action, but actually contested seems to have more action than felt. I mean, felt, that's kind of, how much action is there? Well, this is just not a very good definition of verb. It's an action word. It would make a lot more sense to say a verb is something with a subject. And that's the main point I want to make, that verbs have subjects. Subjects are what make them verbs. There are no verbs without subjects. There are no subjects without verbs. And a subject and a verb can always stand together as a mini sentence. They could be a sentence. So Sandor is the subject of felt. Who did the feeling? Sandor did the feeling. Sandor felt. Now, there are no other subject-verb combinations in this sentence. Well, you might say, well, thinking. Thinking. Who's doing the thinking? Sandor's doing the thinking. Isn't that a subject-verb combination? But you can't say Sandor thinking. That's not English. Sandor thinking. What is Sandor doing? Sandor thinking. That's not English. Now, Sandor is thinking. If that were a sentence, then indeed the verb is 2 words long there, and it is thinking. And that would be an example of a verb there, Sandor is thinking. But none of these other things have subjects. Thinking, Sandor thinking. Contested, who contested the election? The sentence doesn't even say. We don't hear who the subject of contested is. This is not a verb. Growing. Again, what is growing? Sandor growing? Dread growing? Dread growing. This is, again, it's not English. So, keep in mind that a verb is something with a subject. That is what makes it a verb. And this is why, basically, except for commands, the shortest sentences in English are 2 words long. And the 2 words are a subject and a verb. For example, Sandor wept. That is about as short a sentence as you can have. The subject and the verb. Verbs have subjects. That's what makes them verbs. There are several kinds of verbs. We need a quick review here. One kind is the modal verb. These are these 9 verbs. They're very peculiar verbs. They're the only verbs in English that do not have infinitive forms. That is, if a verb like walk has an infinitive form like to walk, a verb like would doesn't have any infinitive form. You would never say to would. I'm hoping to would tomorrow. That doesn't make any sense. So here they are: can, could, should, will, would, shall, may, might, must. And in addition to those, there are auxiliary verbs, which are also called helping verbs, do, be, and have. Now, just to show you what we're talking about here, in the sentence, I might go. The verb is 2 words long. It is might go. What might I do? I might go. And this here, might, is a modal verb. We call it a modal verb. And go is what we would call the main verb. So the whole verb is 2 words long. Now, the auxiliary verbs can also be main verbs on their own. They're not always helping other verbs. Sometimes they are doing their own thing. For example, in this sentence, I have a goiter. And have is the 1-word verb. It is the main verb. It is not a helping or auxiliary verb here. It is a main verb on its own. Modal verbs cannot act on their own. There's always either a main verb present or implied. So, in this sentence here, I could have been a contender. The verb here is 3 words long. Could have been. Could, a modal verb. Have is the helping verb. And been, which sometimes can be a helping verb or an auxiliary verb, here is a main verb. It's the main verb. The main verb, as you see, comes at the end. So just as a curiosity here, the longest a verb can be in English is 5 words long. And you don't often have that, but supposing, for example, a concert was going to start at 8 o'clock and they were going to play a concerto, and you're thinking ahead of that to that time, and you're thinking, well, what will be going on at 8:15, 15 minutes after the concerto has started? Then what's going on is, you could say the concerto will have been being played for 15 minutes. Will have been being played. 5 words long. Modal, auxiliary, 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 main. Played, main verb. The concerto will have been being played for 15 minutes. There's a 5-word verb for you.